Welcome back. This is our third and final day of Maplesec 2020. I'm your host, Jim Love, CIO of IT World Canada. Now, if you weren't here for the past 2 days, you missed a lot, but it's not too late to catch up. There'll be lots of stuff on the site for you to look at. But I want to go over just a little bit and we'll get started. When we came up with this concept for the conference, we wanted to do two things. Focus on the Canadian perspective wherever possible and make it as hands-on as possible. We wanted to do everything to make sure there were takeaways from every session. We wanted to make sure there was something actionable to focus on from every presentation. And we wanted to at least raise an idea that people who work in security would have to think about for out the audience and something to take away from everything. I think we've done a great job so far, but I'm the host, so I'd love to hear from you. Go on to Twitter and use hashtag Maplesec to tell us what you think, how well we've done. Now, if you have a specific question you'd like to see a panel or a person address in there, including a question mark with a tweet, we'll get it right to that question box. And we've been seeing all of those. And so thank you to everybody who's participated and gotten those questions to us. Question mark in the tweet in there. If you use one of the questions, and you'll see them coming up here, if we use one of your questions, I'll send you a $15 Uber Eats card in there. Now, for a final time today, I'm going to draw your attention to the chat feature. People are using it to connect with each other. They're using it to connect with the group, having an offline discussion. So connecting is an important part of these conferences, and we've tried to make every way possible that you could connect and engage throughout the whole concept. So to use the live chat, grab your phone, go to your camera, point it at the QR code. You guys know how to do that. And then you'll pop up into the live chat. You can enter as a guest and you can talk to people individually. You can converse with a group. And if the QR code doesn't work or that's just not your thing, there are instructions just down there and pointing down there. You can see the instructions down with where the chat is. Easy to do. I encourage you not to just watch the sessions, but also to check out the platform. There's an enormous amount of stuff on the platform. I was looking through it again today. It's just fabulous content. And you'll find a wealth of downloadable assets, and many of them new today. We post something new every day in there. And at the top of each day, just for everybody who's there, we've been reviewing the highlights of the day. Now, I'm pleased to have with me CIRA's CTO, Jacques Latour, and he's going to come in and discuss this with me. Jacques, comment ça va? Ça va bien?
Ça va bien. Merci, okay. Jim.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
No.
So tell us a little bit about what you do. Introduce yourself a little bit and tell us what you have planned for the day.
Good. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm the CEO of CIRA. So that's the Chief Technology and Security Officer at CIRA. And in this role, I help to ensure the secure operation of the .ca registry, our DZone services, and of course, CIRA itself. I think I have a unique perspective on internet security. I see the internet from the inside out with .ca as a top-level domain name, and also from outside in with CIRA and DZone as an enterprise customer. So I can tell you it's a very interesting place to be at. I also lead CIRA Labs. It's CIRA's innovation engine. And right now we're focusing our research on something very specific. It's called an IoT registry, and it supports the remote provisioning of 5G-enabled IoT device. So this is something new. It's the future. It's very interesting work happening there. So to begin today, I'd like to give you a preview of the day to come. It's a potpourri, that's French, of important topics for Canadians involved in cybersecurity for their organizations. So first off, Jill Clayton, Information and Privacy Commissioner at the province of Alberta, is going to open with a talk on COVID-19 and how it has changed the privacy landscape. And then it's going to be followed by a panel that discusses privacy and security in the new normal. Hopefully not for too long. Next, we'll hear Amy Oak from ICED, and she's going to talk on standards in cybersecurity. Over the lunch, we're going to have you'll have the option to participate in one of two moderated roundtable discussions. One is on standards, and the other one is on cybersecurity insurance. After the lunch, Vanessa Henry is going to talk about privacy enforcement. It's an issue we're going to be hearing much more over the coming months. So CIRA's 2020 cybersecurity survey found that only a third of responded reported a security breach to authorities. So that's something we need to work on as an industry in Canada. Lastly, we're going to have it's fitting to end the conference with a look ahead. So you want to make sure to visit the panel, which I'm part of, on emerging security technologies and what to expect. And then we're going to have a session on how to deploy AI safely and securely, and a session in advances in data security. So over to you.
Great. Yeah, I know you're going to be on that panel. I'll be catching that panel, talk about cybersecurity in the future. And you said you have a unique perspective, and I truly believe you do. Tell me a little bit about the future. Are you optimistic about the future, Jacques?
I am. As a CTSO, you have to be optimistic. A lot of people say that the bad actors are quicker than us to bypass our security mechanism. But, in general, once your users are cyber aware, they're paranoid to click on something, you train them well. Once you implement the best practice in security and the infrastructure, you implement multiple layers of security and you keep up to date with the landscape. I think if you do all of that, you can cope with the uncertain future. It's a lot of work. It's not easy, but I think so.
I hope, I hope everybody maintains that sense of optimism. But that's what we wanted to bring out of this was hard work. Yes, there are risks. Yes, but hard work. Just going back over yesterday and just see if we hit that goal. The ITWC video team put together a 1-minute clip of highlights from yesterday. Let's take a look, and then I'm going to ask you about the most memorable thing that you found in the day. So we'll flip to that highlight in there.
The other big thing for me is relevance, and this is extremely important for Canadian organizations. Is how relevant is your training? Are you hearing about American examples, American vendors, or case studies from American companies with their breaches, their laws and their regulations? Are you seeing their phishing simulations? The less Canadian your training is, the less engaging it's going to be.
I don't think there's a shame in admitting that you've had a breach or an attack. There are really two kinds of people: those that have had them, and those that have either haven't had them yet or have had them and don't realize it.
One, they'll know the business needs, but they won't understand the cybersecurity context, and they won't understand how to speak to that cybersecurity context either. A lot of abbreviations in this field, a lot of shortcuts in this field, a lot of phraseology that just isn't typical within any organization comes up specifically in the context of cyber and IT.
I really want to encourage you to just keep meeting with people, look at the problem that you're trying to solve, and see who else out there has a stake in trying to solve that problem as well.
I may be a little behind the times, not real good with a computer, but I learned me a thing or two, and I'm here to be your tutor. Bad people, they be everywhere, we call them cyber threats. And where do you go to find them all? They're on the internets. Malware ain't the clothes you wear for shopping at the mall. And whatever you do, don't click the part of where it says install.
Great. So I get to cheat, Jacques. I have a creative team that actually can produce a video of the highlights for me. But I want just get one from you. What was the most memorable thing that you saw yesterday or thought about?
Well, the conference has been great so far. So what resonated with me yesterday was the municipal panel. I think we need to draw the analogy of clean water to clean internet access. Municipalities should do the same due diligence for delivering clean water to the faucet than they should do in providing clean internet access to the user. I think that's it for me. Yeah,
the internet is a utility. It's a great analogy in there. One of the things that we got from there was the interaction with the audience. I just want to, the audience was fantastic yesterday in there. We got some questions from people, and I'm just going to share a couple of those, and just we'll click through them quickly, but keep those questions coming in there. We'll answer them in the sessions that we have, or I'm doing a session at the end of the day, and I promise we will address every one of these questions or try to get you an answer for them. One of them that came up was, and I've tried to pull some that just sort of emphasize the theme. What are your views about making successful hacks public? Should they be kept private instead? And Jacques, you've talked about, the reporting of these things. Interesting comment. People are struggling with that.
Well, the report, you need to disclose incidents, but I don't think organizations should disclose if they pay or not ransomware. So
yeah, and there's a lot of discussion about that. And another question was, how do you support home cybersecurity for work from home? So we get next question in there. So how do you support home security for work from home? And who can be at personal risk? It's true. These also provide a backdoor to corporate assets. We've introduced a number of new attack vectors with work from home. Good question, and hopefully that'll be addressed as well as we go through. And and
so quickly,
our next,
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Jump in. No, it's okay. So the other one is next question. We've got another indicative of these, and this came up. There's a lot of small companies out there. This was 4 people. Canada's full of SMBs from 4 to 400 employee companies. How do you set up phishing tests like you talked about? We don't have an IT department. I mean, there's a need for resources for these small companies, and I think there's a lot of those, and we'll definitely cover some of those today, and we'll definitely do them in the session I'm doing tonight.
Well, the answer is easy for that one. Call Syrup.
Yeah. Number 1, get the Syrup Canadian Shield. It works for the tiniest company.
But that's the cyber awareness training that we offer, and it's
absolutely.
You want all the small companies to have that service. Everybody in Canada needs to be cyber aware.
Yeah, good stuff. Next question in there. We've got any docs references doing cybersecurity training. We just talked about there's some references in there. We've got some stuff from the training sessions yesterday. How do you know if your password account was compromised? Good question in there. Have I been pwned? That's a good place to start in there. I think, Jacques, we pretty much assume that, if you've been using a password for a while, it's probably been compromised at one point or another. But have I been pwned is a good place to do, and I think that's a great place that people can look at.
Just a quick one. If you use the cyber awareness training from Syrup, there's a section you can see where your account password have been compromised, and then you know. Yeah. It's pretty cool.
There you go. Okay, we're answering them. We're answering all the questions. This is great. Next in there, keep those questions coming though. We want them. With 2 to 3 resources, can you recommend the best training manual for a board on cybersecurity? Yes, there's some stuff, and I'll post some of the resources. We have a great Talk to Your Board article done by the head of the former CIO at NavCan, and so we've got some resources. We'll make sure that they're there. Yeah. We understand how to talk to your board is one of those things you've got to do it in without 20 or 30 pages. So there's a great resource. We'll post that for you for sure. Thank you very much on that question. Next question in there. We've got, and here's a great one. You were watching yesterday, I hope you were, Jacques, the video that we showed, Meet 'em at Timmy's. It was a social media sensation in there. So that's a great piece in there. And we will play it one more time today. And if you're really good, if you DM me on Twitter, CIO Jim Love, I'll send you a link sometime today when I'm taking a break in there.
Jim, I think I posted that question.
Did you? Good. Well, I'll send it to you directly.
I love it.
Yeah, that's great.
It was
nice.
Fabulous.
Yeah, your guys were a big influence on having a sense of humor in this, and we thank them for that, because that's been great. We've had a great time producing this. So thank you, Jacques. I look forward to seeing you later on. I have a few housekeeping issues I have to cover. First off, a sincere thanks to our sponsors. I mean this. And Jacques Sira, the Canadian Internet Registration Authority, we could not have done this without you. The belief in this was great. Other sponsors who came to us and believed in this and helped put this together: Fortinet, Field Effect, CyberArk, Tehama, Proofpoint. And those are the people who came, the sponsors came and they brought resources, they've helped fund this. We are also grateful for the support and guidance of a community of organizations. The CIO Association of Canada, once again I'll say I'm a proud member. The CIO Strategy Council, we're going to be talking about standards today, and they're a big force in that. The Mackenzie Institute, with great background on security in there. Cybersecure Canada, another great resource. Serene Risk, the Canadian Cyber Threat Exchange, and the International Institute of Business Analysts, and the BizTech Professionals Association of Canada. Just without those communities have helped support this and bring people to the event and bring ideas to the event. We thank them very much in there. Okay, today, as we've already discussed, we're going to take a deep dive into the privacy landscape and an even deeper look at the impact of this so-called new normal. We'll also be attempting to make our way through the impacts of cybersecurity of the always fascinating world of emerging tech, AI, blockchain, and even quantum computing. And now, without further ado, I'm going to welcome Alberta's, and I am so thrilled to have you here, Jill. I'll say hi to you in a second, but Alberta's Information and Privacy Commissioner, Jill Clayton, who's going to talk to us today about how the pandemic has changed the privacy landscape. So how are you doing today, Jill? So I'll turn it over to you for your presentation.
Great, thank you. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to day 3 of the conference. As I understand it, today is going to be focused on COVID and privacy and emerging technologies, and I am absolutely thrilled to be here today to have a chance to speak with you. I would like to thank the conference organizers for the invitation. And I also understand that more than 1,000 people registered for this event. So I also think that congratulations are in order. So as Jim mentioned, I'm the Information and Privacy Commissioner for the province of Alberta. As Commissioner, I have oversight for Alberta's 3 access and privacy laws, the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, which applies to the public sector, the Health Information Act, which applies in our health sector, and the Personal Information Protection Act, which applies to provincially regulated private sector businesses. So my comments today are going to focus on a few of the key issues or trends that we've seen during this pandemic, which implicate all 3 of our laws and affect governments, healthcare providers, as well as businesses. To start with, and we've already heard some comments about this, and I'm sure you've talked about it over the last couple of days, but I think the biggest change we've seen as a result of the pandemic is the shift to remote working arrangements. I know some employers were already doing this. Sure, of course. Oh, I don't have any slides.
Oh, okay, sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
It's sorry. Just me. It's just me.
Oh, just no, and go for it. Great.
Okay. Yeah, so working from home arrangements, as I said, I know some employers were already doing this before the pandemic, at least to some extent. But of course, these last few months, we've seen a lot of other businesses and governments as well moving in this direction very, very quickly. My office, for that matter, like many others, probably been thinking about doing this for some time, but we thought that we'd have a lot more time to plan for it. And instead, certainly here in Edmonton, almost overnight, we've gone from full capacity downtown office towers to empty streets and buildings. We're starting to see some people coming back to work now, but nowhere near what we had before. And of course, working from home has brought all kinds of privacy issues to the fore, associated with everything from issuing mobile devices, laptops, and smartphones to staff, to enabling remote access to information systems. Not to mention a whole host of challenges associated with authenticating users of remote systems, encrypting devices, as well as communication transmissions, ensuring regular security upgrades and patching, developing and communicating related policies and procedures for acceptable use, for example, as well as around safeguarding and records management, and that's just a few of them. We've also seen an almost overnight worldwide take-up of new and in some cases untested video conferencing technologies. Some of it, we'll all remember Zoom, of course, we're on Zoom, but some of the early privacy issues, but also Microsoft Teams and so many others. From the very start of the pandemic, my office was contacted by organizations in all sectors about how to manage personal information when transitioning staff to work from home. And in response, we published some guidance on our website to help organizations to identify potential risks to privacy and mitigation strategies to help to safeguard information. So our published guidance, and many other my commissioner colleagues across the country have done the same. Our guidance addresses some of the specific challenges of safeguarding information when working from home, including transporting information. So as always, I like to say, never leave your mobile devices or paper documents for that matter unattended in your vehicle, to secure storage once you've arrived at home, particularly if you share a workspace or perhaps even computing equipment with other members of your family. So we are, not surprisingly, starting to see breach reports in both the private sector and from health custodians as a result of work from home arrangements. So far, these are mostly related to loss and theft of mobile devices, but we've also seen an uptick in what we call old school breaches. So those related to transmission errors, emails or mail sent to the wrong address, or including or attaching the wrong person's personal information. So we're monitoring these, we're flagging all of those sorts of COVID-related breaches in order to identify any emerging trends, and we will be reporting on that over the next few months, I expect. So given that a lot of these work from home arrangements are still in place and are likely to become long-term, if not permanent, we do expect to see more of these issues over time. So another topic that we've been consulted on, we were consulted on at the start of the pandemic, concerns the almost overnight adoption of a number of virtual healthcare technologies. So obviously, healthcare professionals were not able to see patients in their offices, and we're looking for ways to use technology to provide care to patients, whether by telephone or video conferencing, messaging, or through smartphone apps. So some of you will know that under Alberta's Health Information Act, healthcare providers are required to submit privacy impact assessments to my office before implementing new information systems or administrative practices relating to how they're collecting, using, and disclosing health information. And these new virtual healthcare technology applications are exactly the sort of thing that triggers that PIA duty. Early on during the pandemic, we were asked by some health custodians for sort of a waiver of that obligation, which of course is not something that I have the ability to do. I can't waive a legal duty under the Health Information Act. But we did publish a statement on our website that acknowledged that we are in unprecedented times, and saying that health custodians at the very least should notify me about any new practices or information systems. And probably within the first 2 weeks or so of the pandemic, we received about 150 of those notifications. Some of them were full-blown privacy impact assessments, and some were just a heads up that a new technology was being implemented. And at last count, a couple of weeks ago, we were up to about 250 of these notifications, or PIAs. So we're currently working on our strategy to review these in the most efficient way possible, so that we can get comments and questions and feedback out to custodians as soon as possible. Because obviously we can't turn around 250 privacy impact assessment reviews overnight. To help out though with custodians, I will say that we worked with the College of Physicians and Surgeons, as well as the Alberta Medical Association, again, to provide guidance on virtual care solutions to healthcare professionals. And that guidance has been widely communicated through newsletters and on websites, and generally addresses the kinds of issues you would expect related to security of the technology solutions and how they're being implemented, authenticating users, what should be included in contracts with tech suppliers, limiting access to health information, auditing capabilities, retention of data, and all those things that we would normally be talking to custodians about. And speaking of PIAs and new tech applications in response to the pandemic, I think I'll just finish up by talking about our involvement in what I would call a health surveillance activity. We've been consulted on a number, but one that received a lot of attention across Canada, of course, had to do with Alberta's early implementation of a contact tracing app called AB Trace Together, Alberta Trace Together. So that app was developed and rolled out by Alberta Health last May, And they did submit a privacy impact assessment, as they were required to do. And we published the results of our review of that solution, that technology solution, in a report that we issued in July. So we don't typically publish reports of PIA reviews. Normally, we just provide recommendations back to the custodian that submitted the PIA to us. But in this case, because of the global attention on contact tracing apps during the pandemic, we wanted to publish the report in the interests of transparency and to contribute to what is an ongoing dialogue and discussion about these kinds of apps and associated privacy risks. So I will say overall, we found that Alberta Health did a really excellent job with their PIA, which demonstrated significant rigor in terms of addressing privacy and security concerns. And we were particularly pleased to see that there was a clear purpose for the app. So it's a technology solution intended to supplement already established manual contact tracing processes. We were also pleased that it was voluntary and limited the collection of identifying information during registration to a user's phone number only. So we worked with Alberta Health throughout the review process, and we were pleased with their efforts to mitigate a few of the risks that we had identified, including the risk of secondary use of the information. We were concerned in particular that the information that users were voluntarily providing would be used for things like quarantine enforcement. And Alberta Health also developed their plans for decommissioning the app as a result of the review process, or through the review process. And they also committed to a number of other recommendations we made around clarifying authorities for collection, as well as use and disclosure of information, being more transparent and clearer to users about how their information was being collected, and also looking at additional safeguards for information at rest and publishing a summary of their PIA. They did commit to that as well. So I think that's all good news. Unfortunately, though, and probably not a surprise to anyone who was following along with the conversation, we did have some significant concerns related to the functionality of the app on Apple devices, and particularly the need to run the app in the foreground, which means you have to keep the device unlocked while you're out and about, which of course increases risk in the event that that device is lost or stolen. And we know that Apple and Google were working on a solution to that and made that solution available for the federal app, the COVID Alert app, but that's not currently available at this time here in Alberta. So we haven't had an update in a while. I know Alberta Health was continuing discussions around fixing that particular problem, and I expect that we'll be following up sometime in the near future. In any event, and to conclude my comments, I think from our perspective anyway, the pandemic really has changed the nature and type of work that we've been engaged in over the last few months, everything from work from home issues to the healthcare virtual care apps. And I suspect that all of this will continue for some time yet. And many of these changes will in fact become our permanent new normal. So I think that some of the initiatives that we're seeing, they might not have gone forward at all, and certainly not at such a rapid pace. And in addition to the topics that I've touched on, we've seen a myriad other issues that I don't really have time to go into in any real depth, but including using health information for research purposes, businesses that are collecting customer information for contact tracing purposes, and public disclosure of information related to the pandemic, and a whole host of all other things. So, as mentioned, all of these initiatives have privacy and security implications, some potentially quite serious, and I encourage businesses and health custodians and governments to keep three things in mind, really, when considering technology solutions during the pandemic. So first of all, with respect to working from home, be aware of the privacy and security implications when using new technology and introducing new processes, and make sure that you communicate expectations to your staff. Working from home is not the same as working in the office, and introduces a host of potential privacy and security risks that employers really need to be thinking about, and they need to come up with strategies to mitigate those risks. Secondly, when implementing new technologies, I know there may be a need to move quickly, and that can lead some organizations to cut corners. But I really do encourage organizations to complete privacy impact assessments before implementing new technologies, whether or not there is a legal obligation to do so. For sure, in particular, rapid deployment of new technologies and changes to established practices have a tendency to lead to privacy breaches because things haven't been thought through. And disruption is itself a risk to privacy, and this pandemic has been nothing if not disruptive. As I already mentioned, we are starting to see COVID-related privacy breaches reported to us, and we expect that will increase over the next few weeks and months. And that leads me to my last recommendation, which is to make sure that you have a breach response plan in place. The last thing that you want is to be flying by the seat of your pants when something goes wrong. So if staff lose an unencrypted laptop, for example, or click on a phishing link, or your system goes down due to ransomware. So those are my my few recommendations that I would make. On another more optimistic note, though, I would say that in some ways the pandemic really is challenging us to do better with technology. Again, I'm thinking, for example, about virtual healthcare technologies. We're seeing ideas and initiatives that have been on the back burner for a long time move forward in a way that has real potential to benefit society. And my hope is that we will seize the opportunity, but do so in a thoughtful manner with due regard to privacy and security concerns. So thank you again for the invitation to be here. I'll leave it there, and we'll just say enjoy the rest of the conference. And once again, thank you so much for the invitation to be here today and to share some of my thoughts and experiences through the last couple of months of the pandemic. Thank you.
I have to say this, I've been a fan of the privacy officers in Canada. The one thing that I just love is the way that you speak clearly on these issues to us, and I think that we should commend that when we see that. It's understandable, and the action is now up to us, and 3 really good recommendations. Thank you so much in there. Just to change gears, we're going to invite CyberArk's AVP and Country Manager Chris Ritz. CyberArk, oh, thank you. Yeah, CyberArk hosted the very successful post-event networking session on Monday, and they're one of the sponsors that made this all possible. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris. Chris?
Thanks, Jim. And hello, everyone. My name's Chris Ritz, and I'm the Area Vice President and Country Manager for CyberArk Canada. And we're very honored and proud to be a key sponsor of the IT World Canada Maplesec event. CyberArk is the undisputed leader of privileged access management, which is a critical layer of IT security that protects the keys to the kingdom, that provides access to data, infrastructure, and assets across the enterprise, in the cloud, and throughout the DevOps pipeline. The cybersecurity threats we're seeing today are very real and well documented. Hackers are creating mass disruption across the globe with advanced cyber threats that are well planned, sophisticated, and directly targeting the most valuable assets within your business. The outsiders are breaking through the perimeter defenses and gaining internal access. And once inside, they're seeking the keys to the kingdom with the intent to cause costly harm that can include damaging your reputation, financial losses, and stolen intellectual properties. Worldwide cybersecurity spend is expected to top $123 billion in 2020, and roughly 75% is spent on perimeter and internal monitoring tools. Yet 90% of all organizations have been hacked. So for us, the new normal we're seeing is physical boundaries have all but disappeared, and identity security is the new perimeter. The other trend we're continuously seeing are those already inside the organizations who have access to sensitive information and can plant seeds to cause internal damage. A good example of insider threat would be the Twitter breach, who were victims of a coordinated social engineering attack. When looking at today's threats, identity security and privileged access represents the largest security vulnerability an organization faces. And why is that? Because identity and privileged access is required everywhere today, in the cloud, in the SaaS applications, in DevOps pipelines, across RPA processes, on remote workers' devices, and more. And the worst part is, the attackers know this. Identity and privileged access allows anyone who gains possession of them to control the organization's resources, disable security systems, and access vast amount of sensitive information. And all predictions point to identity and privileged access abuse getting worse in the future unless organizations act now. This is why so many customers in Canada and around the world have relied on CyberArk, as we deliver the industry's most complete solution to help organizations reduce risks created by privileged credentials and secrets, which include identity access, endpoint protection, security, SaaS offerings and cloud platforms, applications, and DevOps security. We are the pioneer of privileged access management. So we have seen and done more than anyone in the space over the last 20 years and are trusted by over 6,000 world-leading organizations to help protect against the external attackers and malicious insider threats. It is a critical time for all organizations to have a centralized, secured, and managed credential solutions to protect their organization. And Gartner has highlighted this for the last 2 years as the top security project companies must implement. And as we get more into digital transformation discussions, security must be an integral part of this movement. And that is why CyberArk is proud to be a supporter of this event. Thank you, and I hope you have a great virtual experience at Maplesec.
Great stuff, Chris. Thanks. Now, don't forget out there, use the hashtag Maplesec, and a question mark if you have a question you want answered. Keep it coming. We love the interactivity with you. As we go through interesting times, interesting times used to be an ancient curse, that may you live in interesting times. We sure as heck do live in interesting times. Now, but in those interesting times, we've had to accept a new normal at a speed we never thought possible. And in that new normal, we've thrown out a lot of old assumptions. We've done a lot, and we want to take a look at that in our next segment. And this fits so well after Jill's presentation. You think we planned this thing? We did. I'm going to introduce you to ITWC's editorial director, Alex Coop. And Alex is chatting with some privacy and security specialists about the changes they've seen as a result of the pandemic, with a focus on tips for how organizations can adapt. Now, here's some of the highlights of that conversation.
I'm Alex Coop, editorial director here at IT World Canada, and I'm super excited to introduce our panelists today. They're all here to talk about the privacy and security in the new normal. So we're going to start by making our way around here and have our panelists introduce themselves. And at the same time, they're going to share a COVID-inspired remote work story that has made them shudder a little bit.
Great. I'm Kat Code. I'm a data privacy expert. I come from a background in software architecture and engineering. I now run my own consulting company called Binary Tattoo, and most of what I do is looking at global privacy regulations. A story that has certainly made me shudder with COVID is we've seen a lot of companies that were traditionally in person trying to move to a digital transformation, but not everyone is familiar with the privacy and security that we need to do that. So there was a medical company that had hired a group of developers in order to create a digital version of a contact app for them. And in order to do that, they actually shipped off real personal health data in an Excel spreadsheet for the developers to test with.
Yeah, that's definitely shudder-worthy material. Moving on, Leha, can you please introduce yourself and share a story of your own?
Hello, everyone. My name is Leah Heng. I'm the Vice President of Global Security working at CGI. The scope of security program at CGI is quite large. It encompasses not only information security, but also physical security, business continuity, people safety, which leading to my story that I'm actually the person who leading the global crisis management for CGI to respond in response to the COVID-19 crisis. I think I have experienced that everybody was really working together, as a team to make it happen.
Thank you very much. And David.
I'm David Fraser. I'm a partner with a law firm called Beginist Cooper here in Halifax, where I practice internet and technology law, and have been for the last 20 years. And certainly I've seen a lot in the last little while related to COVID. One of the ones that kind of stands out the most when you look at it in terms of just the difference between people working in the same place and people working remotely. The reality checks, some of them have disappeared. I was involved in a situation that involved a fraudulent wire transfer. That if the CTO and the CFO were both kind of in adjacent offices as they used to be, one would have checked with the other. face-to-face, but instead it went out without that reality check and a significant loss to a company.
Over to you, Leo.
Hello, I'm Leo D'Souza. I'm the Deputy Chief Information Officer for the City of Vancouver. And I guess one of the things that has me shuddering was as we had the health order to get people home and working from home, we've extended our corporate network to over 3,000 employees' homes, and the attack surface has now gotten significantly bigger. And making sure that we are doing the best we can to manage that added risk is the thing that keeps me concerned and worried to this day.
Good place to start with referencing the scramble that's been taking place, especially early on during the pandemic, where that initial lift and shift or that initial transition over to some kind of cloud platform was taking place. Are we past that mad rush? And if so, how do we then actually accommodate or prepare for this new normal? Liha, I'll begin with you.
At CGI, because we are a technology company, the part on the remote access, ability to provide that to all our employees, we had that established, throughout the company globally. So that removed a big task for us to trying to scramble and focus on that. And our focus was more on how we ensure that our critical people can continue to provide the service to our client in the proper manner. There was a period that we have to trying to work it out and get the proper equipment to the employees so that they can have the adequate equipment and not using their personal equipment to process company information.
Leo, I'm curious, in the public sector, which most of the time I guess is described as a bit more cash-strapped, how on earth did you, first of all, manage to get properly secure devices to people?
With the City of Vancouver, we had started a technology transformation journey 2 or 3 years ago. We've got a workforce of about 5,000, 6,000 information workers, and then the city's workforce is more like 10,000 people. We had started 2 years ago to really educate our business units to say, look, if you have employees who are information workers and you want to have flexibility and resilience, pay them a little bit extra, upgrade them to a laptop versus a desktop. And so we had about 2,000 of our employees on laptops. So we still had a pretty big gap, right? The global shortage of laptops was significant because the virus impacted China first, and their factories closed for a period of time. And so we were not able to get enough equipment to move people home with equipment so they could work. And so we did implement a loaner program where we had some laptops on hand. We found innovative ways to take desktops, putting a VPN on them and putting a way to get them to bring it home with a screen and a keyboard and plug it into their home router. So there were ways for us to move forward. We're past that now, and I think now we're going back and addressing some of the gaps.
And Kat, you have a very unique perspective on all of this. What have been the lessons learned, to this point?
For me, the beginning of the pandemic was very much a scramble to get tools out. At this point, though, it's got to be more about people and policy. So people are now working from home, but they're not treating their homes as if they would treat their offices. One privacy thing that always gets me is the number of screenshots you see of internal meetings that appear on social media. You would never walk into a building and take a picture in a meeting room and then turn around and post it. But here are people posting what is essentially private meetings, and usually names and images and likenesses. So at this point, now that people are up and running again and going, it's going to be really crucial for companies to come back in for those information security policies. Privacy is now in their home. And as an individual that works for a company, you now have a role to play in protecting that privacy.
Could I just build on that? I guess timing-wise worked out well. We were revising all of our technology policies, and so we had almost had them ready to go, and then the pandemic hit. And to Kat's point, in June, we actually went back and revisited those policies in light of what we learned. And we actually did change some things. And it's really now about how do we make sure people are thinking, what does my action do? And didn't even think about that idea of screenshots of meetings, right? But that is a really interesting piece.
Those are great points. David, I'm sure you also had to go through a bit of the scramble when it comes to getting devices into people's hands and making sure they're secure.
Kind of thinking as a lawyer, you're always imagining yourself standing in front of a judge or in front of a regulator talking about what is reasonable in the circumstances. And the circumstances in March were bonkers. And the circumstances since then have normalized a bit. And so one could say that it was reasonable, that whatever you did in March was reasonable in light of the emergency, in light of public health, in light of that. But the situation has changed. And so those changed circumstances mean that what is reasonable has changed. Now is the opportunity to reflect and think, okay, well, we need to reconceptualize this. We need to have the policies, the procedures, and the training awareness.
Now, I'm curious, in the corporate world, how do you balance making sure they're safe, making sure you have technology in place to keep them safe and healthy? And how do you balance that with allocating the right amount of resources to privacy and security?
At the beginning of the pandemic, for sure, people didn't have the right tools. They were sending files via regular email, again, like lots of private data that shouldn't have been sent, or people were printing things off and leaving them on their desks at home. One of the big ones for me is always the background of where you're sitting. Not everyone considers that. Clearly, we're on a panel. We have all curated backgrounds here. But when this whole thing started with online school, my kids used to report back to me on the daily about what they could have figured out about someone based on where they were sitting and what was in the background of the image. There's a lot of talk about getting people good seats, right? Like good chairs are important if you're sitting all day at home. If you are budgeting for chairs, you might want to budget for a privacy screen.
And Leha, how about yourself? I'm wondering, when you're talking to customers about that balance between, yes, keeping employees and workers safe, but then also maintaining strong security and privacy practices.
I don't think that we start to think about security only during the COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
This is the practice that we already integrated, for years now for company. Like when you talk about the question of training, the security awareness training, CGI, I started that more than 15 years ago. So this type of message communication ongoing has existed in the corporation. What may change today is how do you adapt this message, this training to the current context where people are working from home. A lot of what I'm hearing is about how we protect the company information. But I think it's also a good way to connect the people. This is a benefit for them because they will also learn and how to protect themselves when they use their own equipment, when they're managing their own personal information. So at the end of the day, there must be something in it for people to commit and engage and getting themselves engaged. And then we make sure that the people who are working on client engagement, they cannot access these applications with their personal information because it's built in with these restrictions that if you don't have a company computer, you cannot access. What we did during the crisis management plan is that there's team that mobilize and bringing the equipment, even if it's not a laptop, even if it's desktop, make sure that we are bringing these equipment home to the employees.
David, so I want to start with you. How does the company now continue to train its employees and keep its employees up to date now that they're working remotely and still having to adhere to these strict privacy and security regulations? Has that changed at all?
Because we have multiple offices, we were already in a context of doing a fair amount of remote learning. And so it really wasn't that big of a stretch to push that out. But I think there's also wanting to avoid the kind of stereotypical Zoom fatigue and to try to make it as bite-sized as possible and also available on a self-serve basis so people can kind of pull down the information that they need. But also an important thing is you want to make sure that security is just baked in and happens in the background. It's not something that people have to think about or people have to trip over in terms of just the basic fundamentals. Provide them with secure tools, secure systems, because darn well that, for example, if your email system has a 5 megabyte attachment limit, they're going to be using Gmail or Hotmail for sending those large files.
And Leo, I'm curious what you think about that.
I think David's point, what was reasonable in March is not reasonable now. Reverting some of those changes that, facilitated getting people home, we have to do that now. That extension of our network into people's homes, we made a significant investment in a new modern endpoint protection platform that lets us control and manage those devices, whether they're VPN'd into our network. As long as they're connected somewhere, we can manage them. I think we've got a long ways to go, and the vulnerabilities to me still are at the human interface. We were attacked and asked to change direct deposit information. Good thing we had already started a more robust program with our financial folks, with our accounts payable folks, and so somebody caught it and raised it. We really made sure we thanked them and said, hey, this is exactly what we need you to do. And so now we're doing even more targeted training, risk-based, right? Because with a workforce of 6,000, it's difficult to get to everybody in an engaged manner like we're doing today.
I'm sure you've seen this up close, what was maybe reasonable in March is no longer now. Do you have a story that you can maybe share with us?
More importantly, what I like to recommend is that you farm out part of that threat landscape to your employees. And this whole expression that we're all in the same storm but a different boat. So what I might perceive as a threat in my home is going to be vastly different in a house where there's someone who has to share computers with their children, which is going to be different than the household where there's 4 people who are roommates and you need to get onto Zoom calls and you're discussing private information, but there's no closed doors. If I look at my home and my office, the threats here for me to work from home are vastly different than other households and other spaces. You may have employees who can't afford internet that are going into public Wi-Fi. So it's a great time to engage with your employees and go back to them and say, hey, you know what, why don't you tell me some of the ways your setup might be at risk? So you're now engaging with them to reconsider their situation and reconsider where those privacy and security holes might be.
I'm sure you've all to some extent interacted with some kind of vendor to help you get along and get through this.
I think anybody who's kind of thinking, I need to reinvent this or I need to invent this, is somebody else has probably done it and somebody else can probably do it better than I can. We hold service providers to a higher standard of security and privacy and diligence than we generally hold ourselves. And so you're generally going to get a better, more secure product from a good, high-level, well-regarded vendor.
Leah, I'd love to hear what you have to say. And as a consulting firm,
I didn't realize I take it for granted what we already have established. For example, online training that we have established has existed for years. But for sure, a lot of what we have built can be reusable. We can share that. We can help clients. We did not wait until when this incident happened, to create and patch on these security controls. Everything has been built in throughout that. We don't let the security policy sit on the shelf. It becomes a dynamic document that needs to be built in so that we can measure. So that's the only way to demonstrate to our client that we are providing a safe environment.
Great points. And Leo, any kind of lessons learned from interacting with vendors and suppliers during this time?
I would say in general, all the vendors have been more than willing to work with us. Just to touch on the privacy piece, in British Columbia, we have probably one of the strongest privacy laws in the world. There were probably a whole bunch of departments that went out and ended up using American services and hosting personal identifiable information in the U.S. And now we're finding all of them and saying, hey, we have a corporate standard. This is what you need to use. And we're bringing them back into the fold.
Is there an increased focus on data sovereignty?
So in order to have European citizen data or European company data, you do have to have data sovereignty and you have to have that data in the EU. That same thing will be applying to Quebec's Bill 64 as well. I'm seeing a lot of companies looking to move their data to servers that are geographically located, but a lot of the cloud servers are also trying to accommodate that. Putting that kind of functionality into your product now, before every single country is going to require data sovereignty, is probably a good move, because it looks like we're going in that direction where every geographically located group is going to require data stored within their geography.
This is a question for everyone. How optimistic are you that Canada will improve its savviness around privacy and security?
I think we're going to see some pretty significant legal developments when it comes to privacy law in Canada. Quebec has their bill. Ontario just launched a consultation on whether or not they should come up with a provincial privacy law that would oust PIPEDA and that would apply to workplaces. The reason why we came up with this kind of burst of privacy laws in the 1990s was because of the evolution of technology, and the adoption of technology is only accelerating. Other sorts of paradigms that weren't there in the 90s that we need to think about is machine learning, artificial intelligence, big data analytics, and things like that.
And Leo, how are you keeping track of all this in the midst of maintaining a remote workforce?
The changes to the British Columbia Privacy Act around transit of PII has helped us, because at least now we can say it has to be stored in Canada, but we're not so worried about the transit, and that actually stopped us from adopting Office 365. So now we've implemented SharePoint Online. We'll have plans to move into that more Office 365 world. But the reality is there was a certain meeting I was in, and the host of the meeting was using Google Docs. We have corporate tools and technology. At the end of the meeting, reached out to that person and said, hey, this isn't on. You're actually breaching the Privacy Act.
Just a final takeaway, final thoughts about privacy and security in the new normal.
I think everyone wants to get on with developing their product and going back to business as usual, but we really do need to stop and take a moment to put time, resources, money into privacy and security. It will save you time and money in the long run to do that.
And in the new normal, as before, security and privacy should be part of that. So there's no difference.
The new normal is not stable. The new normal is going to continue to be fluid. And I think the normal is that fluidity is going to continue.
For us now that we've established a workforce that is remote, it's really thinking about what the future looks like. What does this mean for our society? I mean, our office downtown had 200 plus people in it, and now it has 5. Do we keep that office space? And if we don't, what is the impact on all the businesses around where our office is?
Thank you very much for your time here, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the show today.
The thing in cybersecurity that keeps me awake at night is data privacy. The continued business model of exploiting personal data seems to undermine any attempt in establishing a reasonable privacy regime without significant intervention by the government.
A little known fact, okay? Canada is making great inroads in trying to lead the way in the development of cybersecurity standards. And if you don't know how important this is, I watched Jim Balsillie explain it, and suddenly a light went on with me. And I've done some work with the CIO Strategy Council, which is doing a lot of work in there. Standards are important to us. They're the critical means by which businesses ensure their security strategies and policies are implemented consistently and in a way that can be measured and objectively analyzed. This may not seem intuitive, but it is exceptionally important, not only for businesses, but for our position in the world. And so I'm thrilled to have Amy Oki, who's presenting with us today. So, ladies and gentlemen, pay close attention to ISED Senior Engineer Amy Oki as she suggests why and how you can have a greater say in the development of these standards. Now, immediately following her presentation, you have an opportunity to jump into one of the moderated lunchtime discussions to share your views on this. So without further ado, Amy, over to you.
Great, thank you for having me. Yes, I'm coming to you from Ottawa, Ontario, and I've been working for the past year on the Cybersecure Canada program. So this all ties into our national standard, but first I'll give you an overview of the program. So We're specifically targeting small and medium organizations, which just because they're small doesn't mean there aren't few of them. So we have over 98% of Canadian businesses are actually small and medium organizations, which is less than 500 employees. So we started this program in ISED, which is Innovation, Science, and Economic Development within the federal government, partnering with the Canadian Security Establishment, specifically the Cyber Centre. So the experts at the Cyber Centre came up with 13 control areas to develop a baseline document to start a pilot program. Participation in the program is voluntary. There are other international programs. You may have heard of Cyber Essentials, which is the United Kingdom's program. Their program is actually mandatory if you want to do work with their government. So for now, we're working on the pilot. We're gaining experience with our certification bodies, and this is all driven to support Canadians' national cyber strategy. So at the end of this presentation, I'll really dig into how we're developing the national cybersecurity standard in Canada, which will be the backbone of this program going forward when it's ready. So our goal is really to improve the baseline cybersecurity for all businesses in Canada. And even if some businesses don't pursue the certification all the way to the end, we really just want to raise awareness and educate Canadians about cybersecurity. Doing all of this, given our new virtual world, doing these virtual conferences, we're hoping to be able to just increase the confidence in the digital economy moving forward. So basically our goal, we know small businesses right now are struggling in so many different ways. We want to make sure that this certification provides good value. So the feedback that we really want to get from Canadians is this cost effective? Is this something that you think that your business could do for a reasonable amount of money? We want the implementation burden to be really low. So not every company is going to have an IT department or anyone that has any cyber experience. So we're hoping that with the baseline controls and then future e-learning modules that we're developing, the average business could implement all the controls. So just looking specifically at the different controls, first and foremost, incidents happen. You always think it's not going to happen to you, but just like having any kind of business continuity plan, you want to develop an incident response plan, because eventually something big or small will happen to your organization and you want to make sure that you can react to it. So you're also going to be securely configuring all of your devices, having a good strategy for backing up and encrypting your data, identifying what's most important to your company and making sure that it's safe. Which also means, of course, you're going to be enabling security software that comes with all your different programs. A lot of companies now have portable media, such as USB keys or various devices that they carry important data with them. So you want to make sure that your portable media is secure. Using strong user authentication. We know that there are problems when humans are sharing different devices, and you want to make sure that the right people have access to your data. Also securing websites. With so much e-commerce going on, we need to make sure that your customers' data is safe and that you're making sure that no one can hack into your website.